The Russian foreign minister is saying new weapons sent to Ukraine by the United States really risks escalating this beyond the war of Russia and Ukraine into what he said is a third country. I'll show you why. The eastern part of Ukraine, now controlled by Russia, is a very different battlefield. And in order to give the Ukrainians a chance, the United States has sent a new advanced rocket system in that has a range of about 50 miles, and it can move pretty quickly around the terrain and is highly accurate. A little bit of video of this. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has promised not to fire, and that the Ukrainians have promised not to fire the new weapon system into Russia. But obviously, U.S. rockets flying into Russia would not make the Russians very happy. And here, especially around Kharkiv in this area, it'd be certainly well within range, and the Russian supply depots well within range of those rockets. Earlier spoke with the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, talking about exactly what the Ukrainians are going to be able to do with these systems. Bring in now former NATO Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, retired Admiral James Stavridis. He's the author of The Sailor's Bookshelf, 50 Books to Know the Sea, as well as To Risk It All, 9 Conflicts, and The Crucible of Decision. Admiral, good to see you as always, sir. Thank you. New missiles to Ukraine, are these game changers, or does this just make the 100-day war turn into a 100-year war?
I'd say it's somewhere in the middle. These new missiles, 50-mile range, very accurate. And don't forget, they're motorized, so you can shoot and scoot, as we say on a battlefield. They're very mobile. So all of that will be a positive impact, obviously, for the Ukrainians. I don't see it suddenly unwinding the crush of the Russian military forces day after day. But I think it's a smart move on the part of the administration.
At least got the Russians' attention. They say that this has the potential to bring in a third party. You've got Secretary Blinken saying the Ukrainians have promised not to use these to shoot into Russia, although they have attacked Russian targets before. Is there any reason to believe that this doesn't just risk more escalation?
I think it's conceivable it could risk more escalation, but I don't know about anybody else, but I'm kind of at the point of, okay, the Russians have invaded. They are committing war crimes massively. They are launching attacks all over Ukraine. Ukraine did nothing to provoke it. And so I'm unconvinced that we should be overly concerned about hurting the Russians' feelings. I don't think this is going to escalate because Russia has got its hands full dealing with the Ukrainian army. I'm not sure they have significant capacity to escalate at this point.
The obvious response to that would be they have nuclear weapons, which are pretty easy to retaliate with. I see you shaking your head, so I advisedly won't go down that path. But just from the sense of where we're at, ground truth in Ukraine, the eastern part of Ukraine is very different. It seems as though the Russians are at the very least holding their own and not beating the Ukrainians, perhaps, but able to hold ground. At some point, are the Ukrainians going to have to acknowledge that a large part of their country is going to become Russian territory?
You know, those are decisions for Ukrainians to make, obviously, not for you and I. But as you look around at how these kind of conflicts end, often it involves a negotiation, which conceivably could include an exchange of territory for peace. I'll give you a practical example. 1939, the Soviets invaded Finland. The Finns fought them to a standstill. Ultimately, they settled that conflict with a transfer of about 10% of the land of Finland. By the way, that's how Finland became a neutral nation. They had to pledge neutrality. One of the ironies of this war is now Finland is moving into the NATO camp. But yes, there could be a negotiation if agreed to by the Ukrainians.
The flip side of that, right, is that this war's been going on since 2014. I was there at the beginning of it, and it's been a stalemate in the East ever since. Then the Russians obviously really escalated this in February, got pushed out, and now we're sort of back almost to where we started. What do you make of the fact that the international attention, especially the media attention, has moved on from this? And at some point, doesn't the world move on and we go back to 2015 or 16 or 17 when there was a war in eastern Ukraine, and that was just the way it was?
I don't think so. And my rationale for that is this is the third strike for Vladimir Putin. He invaded Georgia in 2008, Ukraine in 2014. You're absolutely correct. Now he's invaded Ukraine again in 2022. I sense a sea change in how other nations are looking at Russia. Look at the Germans doubling their defense budget. Look at the Finns and the Swedes joining NATO. I was just in Switzerland. They're having serious conversations about potentially being part of NATO. This is a very different third-time strikeout by Vladimir Putin. So no, I don't think the international community, certainly not the West, the democracies, are going to just shake their head and go back to doing business as usual with Russia. This is going to last a long time in terms of its impact on Russia and its economy.
Have we leveraged the success of bringing NATO together and helping the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians beating back the Russians really against all odds, and in fact against a whole lot of real smart TV talking heads? Have we leveraged that success enough against China as a warning to not invade Taiwan?
We have not done so overtly. In other words, you don't see press conferences flying out of Brussels and NATO headquarters saying, hey, China, watch it. On the other hand, put yourself in the shoes of President Xi. Right now, he's got to be asking himself, in the context of him making a move on the island of Taiwan militarily, he's got to be asking, are my generals as bad as those Russian generals? I don't know. They've never been in a big war. Are the Taiwanese going to fight the way the Ukrainians are? Yeah, they might. Will the West hang together economically and try to sanction China? Much different than sanctioning Russia. And then number four, your point, NATO. Boy, that team NATO seems pretty coalesced around the idea of defending against those who would attack democracy. So I don't think there's an overt statement, but I suspect the impact in Beijing is real.
Is not, to use a title of the book, to risk it all? Are we not risking enough by going after the Chinese? Is this the time to put our chips on the table with that overt pressure?
I think it is premature to do that. The factors that I mentioned, I think, are strongly at play. And secondly, recall that this year, toward the end of the year, President Xi wants to be elected to a third five-year term leading China. He's not looking for a big confrontation with the West right now. I think he is not quite ready to risk it all.
Fair enough. Admiral, it's good to see you. The author of the book, To Risk It All. We'll see you soon, sir. All the best.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.